Well, grace and greetings, everyone. Hope you are having a fantastic, fantastic day. This is yet the day that the Lord has made, and we are rejoicing and we are glad in it. I just want to welcome you. I want to welcome you to this Justice June conversation, and I'm absolutely excited wherever you're watching from to have you here with me in the virtual space, in the online space. I'm sitting right here at my desk. It may look a little weird. It's not my customary setup, but I wanted to make sure that we were here. We were here on time, and more than anything, that we had all that we needed to present this information to you. This is an absolutely important conversation. So I need you to do me a favor. I need you, if you haven't done it already, to hit the share button. Make sure you like, make sure you tag somebody, make sure you hit share. This is an incredibly important conversation. It's a conversation that we absolutely have to have. And we've got to have this conversation because it impacts those who are closest to us. Tonight, we are commencing what we call Justice June. And we're talking about, some incredibly important things. The reason we're doing it is because Scripture says that justice is the foundation of God's throne. So think about that. What God's throne is made of is justice. The foundation of it is justice. And so God is a God of justice. And so justice issues ought to be lifted. They ought to be heralded by those who represent Jesus, are his hands and his feet in the world. And so we're grateful today to be able to have this conversation. And this is only part one. Tonight, we are blessed to have in the virtual space our amazing district attorney, the one and only Shalana Jones. She's absolutely amazing. She's amazing. She's an incredible human being. And we're blessed to have her here tonight. We're blessed to have her here tonight in this space, having this dialogue in this space about who it is that qualifies for an expungement. How do you go through the process of getting a criminal record expunged? And next week, we're blessed to have those not only from the DA's office, but also our advocates like Devetter Law, Georgia Legal Services, on site in person. If you qualify for an expungement, then next week we want you to be here so that you can walk through the steps of getting that record restriction done, and hopefully removing the barriers to a better life. So we're excited tonight. So I want you to help me welcome our one and only great DA, Shalana Jones.
Good evening, Pastor Osborne. How are you doing tonight?
Listen, I'm doing the best I can with what I got to work with.
Amen. That's all we can do.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Right.
I just wanted to tell you I'm absolutely thankful, so excited to have you here in this space tonight, and grateful that you had a moment to share with us for and a conversation at this level of importance. This is an incredible conversation to have, and after we announced it, I've had so many calls and questions about it because it impacts people that we know, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Our
And
families, our friends. So
I also happen to think I hear an echo. I hope you can hear me well. But I think that these conversations should take place in these settings more often than they do, um, because I think that people should always have access to information. We know that, when you know better, you do better. I prefer to have these kinds of conversations in the community because I always prefer to see folks in the community before I see them in the courtroom, right? And you want people to have every opportunity to avail themselves of of the law, and expungements and record restrictions, as it were, um, help us to have. That's one of the arenas wherein we have a more expansive idea of what justice truly is, right? So, but some people think that when it comes to prosecution, that justice is about locking people up and throwing away the key. And I always want people to know that that's one facet of what the district attorney does, but the definition of accomplishing justice for all and freedom for all is much more expansive than that.
Absolutely. And let me just say um, that I appreciate you taking the time to share and have this conversation because on so many levels, the tall and short of our interactions with the justice system is coming through the courtroom and not necessarily on the other side of it. And I know that there's so many impacts that your office specifically has with victims, with justice impacted people, not only on the front side of it, but what are the ramifications of it? What happens after you are now justice impacted for a mistake that you've made, perhaps, and now with the barriers that are set up, there are things that prevent you from really making a turn, really turning things around and living life kind of to a different beat. So I'm excited that you are willing to have, and not just willing, but that your desire is to have conversations like this because to a large degree, we know that there are places across our country where people are not moved and motivated to have conversations like this. After you have had an interaction with the justice system, that's it and that's all, and whatever the complexities of that may be, you're on your own to face them. And a lot of times people don't know about the other types of recourse that they may have to start their life again after they have served their time, after they've paid their debt. How do I restart my life again? And so I think this is, just an incredibly important conversation. So we're getting ready. I'm going to ask her some questions, but I do want to say this, that if you have questions, I want you to leave them in the chat. Leave the questions in the chat. If it's something that can be answered in this setting, we'd love to do it. Leave those questions in the chat. Make sure you hit share. Make sure you like and tag somebody who may directly benefit from this. Maybe this isn't your conversation directly, but it is a conversation that can benefit someone in your family, in your sphere of influence. Make sure you hit share and invite some people in the room because we all know someone who's been justice impacted, and we all know someone who can live better on the other side of that through a program like this. So let me just jump in and ask my sister first. Can you describe? We're using some different terms now in 2024. Can you describe to me what it means to be justice impacted? Who are those people?
Sure. Um, to put it plainly, and to start out answering your question, a justice impacted individual is any person whose life has been impacted by the criminal justice system. And one of the things that I really like about that particular term is because it is that it acknowledges that our criminal justice system touches the lives of not just the victim who is victimized, but not just the defendant who is the accused, but we must remember as a society that it touches families both on the victim side and on the defendant side. And what we know to be true is that when people get arrested and there's a bond that has to be paid, somebody's calling a parent to post their house or to post bond, or a friend or a spouse. Somebody is calling a pastor
Absolutely.
to come in and testify for them and say that they're a good person. That
Absolutely.
they might have children who we are seeing in 2024 in recent years a lot of intergenerational incarceration. And so as we start to talk about generational curses and the things that we pass down, and this whole body of what people call epigenetics, right?
Yes.
Then what we know is that in the same way that it's more likely for a child who has one alcoholic parent They have a 50% chance of becoming an alcoholic themselves. That's what the data says. But what we don't really focus on is the data that says if you have one parent in the criminal justice system, then you're more likely to end up in the criminal justice system yourself as a child of that parent. And there are very real impacts that a crime and or its prosecution have on people who never come to the courthouse, who aren't a part of the case. And so what is a justice impacted individual is any person whose life is adversely impacted by the criminal justice system and its operation. Yeah, it's how it
Well,
works.
I think that's incredibly helpful because we're dealing with terms I think that um, remind us that people are human, right? I think the terms that we're trying to speak in and the way we describe things it matters, and so in a way this humanizes those that are not only experiencing the brunt of the actions of the offender, but also
Mhm.
also the offender themselves. What does it mean for them to be human, and what does life look like beyond this moment for them? And so um, I can appreciate that. Let me ask this: um, when you are now impacted by the justice system, when you are on the offending side, and now you're impacted by the legal system. Um, can you describe some of the limitations and the restrictions that now hang over your head as a result of your interaction now on the other side of the justice system?
Sure. When a person has involvement with the criminal justice system from the point of their arrest to the point of their conviction, you have what's called, people call it your criminal record. It's called in the state of Georgia, it's your GCIC, which is the Georgia Criminal Information Center's report. So in the same way that uh, Equifax and the other major credit agencies keep up with your credit history and financial transactions, the Georgia Crime Information Center also keeps up with your criminal activity. And so that becomes the report that follows most people culturally and just societally. We have been trained and directed to check our our credit history every so often to make sure that our credit score is accurate and that the transactions on our credit score are correct, and that so that it doesn't close any doors to us financially. But we don't do the same, and we aren't told to do the same with our criminal history. Why is this important? Two reasons. It's a center and a bureau or agency just like any other. And what that means is that they are subject to make mistakes. Secondly, you may, and even a lot of people may have criminal information on their criminal history report that they are not aware of. So people, juniors and seniors, right? If if you have if your name is John Henry Sr., and then you have John Henry the Second and John Henry the Third, and you have a lot of inaccurate information where a crime or a charge could belong to somebody else, and you don't know it, right? Um, and then
That part is incredibly important.
incredibly important, especially if you have one of those common names. It happens all the time. But um, to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And so critically important that people, um, check their criminal histories in their GCIC reports on a regular basis. Now, I will also say that in the same way that you have a GCIC, every state has its own bureau or agency for keeping up with your criminal history and arrest. So if you're someone who has lived in North Carolina or Nevada, for example, you may want to go ahead and see what's outstanding in those other states. Sometimes that appears on your Georgia criminal history report, but there's also something called an NCIC, which is the National Criminal Information Center. And
Okay.
those tend to keep up with federal offenses. So people need to know the difference between state offenses and charges that might be levied by the FBI or a U.S. Attorney's Office or something to that effect, which is federal in nature.
Wow. So that piece is incredibly important because a lot of times you got family members doing all kind of stuff, and and you you may not be aware of what your name is tied to. That's
Right.
incredibly important. As a matter of fact, I think at during one of our expungement clinics in the past, we had one or two persons to really identify with that. I had a family member
Right.
to allow something to bleed over off them onto their family member, and it
Right.
created some incredible negative impacts. But it's amazing to me because whether people have whether they are on the right side of prosecution, like they actually did do it, or whether they have been, unfairly, I guess if something has been unjustly affixed to them, a lot of times there is just not a clear process, or people rather aren't aware of the process to get those things straightened out, and they just kind of live with it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you're absolutely right to say that. And taking that one step further, if we know that, you know, the natural life cycle of a case is that it might start from an arrest. You might not have ever been charged with an offense. You could have been arrested and fingerprinted and booked on an offense that ultimately never got prosecuted, right? And you're thinking, well, I never got prosecuted. I never had to show up in court. I never got convicted of anything. But the importance of record restriction is not just also to ensure that your record is accurate, it is that any sign of any criminal activity on your criminal report is stigmatizing. It hangs
yes,
over your head. And
yes,
it doesn't matter. So, if, for example, an employer who is considering, 10 candidates, 5 of whom have some criminal history, even if it's favorable, meaning they were never prosecuted for it, but that they can see that arrest, and they're looking at another 5 people who don't have any criminal history and no arrest at all. Who do you think they're going to make offers to?
exactly,
Right? And
exactly,
this is why when we talk about, so accuracy is important, awareness is important, but access to um, benefits, employment, housing, military careers, things like that, access is critically important. And if you don't know what is on your criminal history, then you could be giving up or waiving access. It could be a stumbling block to an impediment to your future, your forward progress.
absolutely. So we're talking about housing, we're talking about employment, we're talking about you said the military. There's certain benefits. Um, you can't say this, but I'm going to say this. Just cover your ears for a moment. Apparently, the only thing you can do with a record is run for president. But I'll leave that. Um,
Point taken.
I'll leave
Point
that for
taken.
tomorrow. I'll save that for Sunday.
Point
Um,
taken. Point taken. Which is also, I mean, honestly, which is also a, a, a very important point as it relates to justice, right? Um, because justice uh, underscores this idea that everyone is treated with equity, right? And you don't know who's going to be reviewing your criminal history. Or and so somebody, what we know is that because humans are flawed, they may be willing to overlook the offenses of some and not others. And it's this is why expungements and record restrictions are a tool that advance the cause of justice, right? That advance the cause of justice, or should be intended to advance the cause of justice, right? What it means is that it gives everyone who is entitled to it, whether because of um, whether it because that information is wrong, or whether it because a lawmaker has created an exception that allows somebody to get that information removed. Everyone who is entitled to a clean slate can have one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do want to raise one thing, and I know that you're driving the bus on this
No,
conversation.
no, go ahead.
I don't want people to think in any means, and I often have to correct people's mindset, because what we know to be true and believe about the criminal justice system is based on a lot of the messages and experiences that we've had. And people think that when you have these kinds of conversations, it means that you don't care about victims, right? That you're not victim centered, because somehow we lose sight of the fact that protecting victims and ensuring public safety is not mutually exclusive with making sure that justice is accomplished, right? The two are not mutually exclusive. You can hold wrongdoers accountable, right? Right. And
Right.
and at the same time, right, be just towards those people that are entitled to fairness, right?
We can walk and chew gum. We can. We can do
That,
both. Yes.
right, 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 exactly.
We are called to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. And
What a call.
all of those things have to kind of mix in all together. What's amazing, though, I don't disagree with you that in conversations like these, um, people generally run to the extremes,
Mhm.
and they think that a conversation like this excludes the rights or the harms done to those that have been victimized by crime. And I don't think their scope is wide enough. And as a pastor, sadly, I get to deal with people on both ends of the spectrum, both those who have, some crazy life experiences, being on the being victimized, being a victim, and prayerfully their journey with me helps them move from victim to victory. But they have been negatively impacted by the actions of another. And then there's another type of person that I get to pastor who, for whatever reason, their negative interactions or their interactions rather with the justice system has left them unable to make progress. And in pastoring both of those people, we've got to offer something, certainly that heals, something that is a healing for those who have suffered and been victims of crime, and certainly offering something that helps to restore the life of someone who has paid their debt and qualifies uh,
Mhm.
for a clean slate and a fresh start. Or like we were talking about just a moment ago, because of some recording error, um, they have ended up suffering unjustly, and they need a
Sure.
pathway to get that cleared up. So,
Sure.
no, go ahead.
Well, I think there are a lot of faith principles wrapped up in that, in what you just said. And if I could boil it down to, you
Sure.
know, the idea that but for the grace of God go I. A lot of people don't know that 40% of Americans have had involvement with the criminal justice system, right? A lot of people lose sight of the fact that not everybody who is justice impacted is involved in the 7 deadly cases, the 7 deadly kinds of offenses that we're talking about. That you'd be surprised to find how many different ways that one can break the law. And then you have things like DUIs, which are every person's crime. That crime does not um, that's one of the offenses that we have where almost anybody can end up
Right.
being arrested.
Right.
And so there's, the idea of empathy. There's the idea that you can balance accountability with compassion. It's possible to do that. And in fact, an effective resolution does just that. It holds
Absolutely.
someone accountable to the extent and to the measure that their offense constitutes a transgression against a person and or public safety. But our criminal justice system is set up so that once a criminal, always a criminal, right? And so this is how we make people become what they have done, right?
Right.
People become what they are, or people carry that label of criminal if you don't create a means once they have paid their debt to society for them to move forward. And I think a lot of people don't realize what cost that has to society and to citizens and to taxpayers, right? When you make it easier for people to reoffend, they do. And
Absolutely.
taxpayers, no doubt about it, are paying for everyone that is justice impacted. You pay that. Your taxes pay that through
Absolutely.
policing and incarceration, et cetera.
Absolutely. So I'm glad you cleared that up because I know that if a person's if particularly in your role, if someone's posture is not strictly, hey, we're gonna lock everybody up, uh, and we're gonna keep you locked up forever. If that doesn't tend to be your bend, people try to misconstrue that.
Mhm.
When you're only trying to make sure that there are fair and just outcomes for everybody. Uh,
Sure.
and so I think that's an important point. So let me ask you this. Um, so we've talked about community limitations and restrictions that come, whether it be your employment, your housing, the benefits. There is some restriction on your outlook because of it. Can we answer the question, how do I know if I qualify for a record restriction?
If you have had some criminal activity and you have been arrested, there are 3 instances in which, or 3 outcomes in which you would be automatically entitled to have your record restricted, meaning having that arrest restricted on your GCIC report,
Okay.
having fingerprints removed from the system, and
Okay.
having any booking photographs destroyed. That's what the entire record restriction is. It's not just the report itself, it's other things. In 3 instances, we as the state are required to initiate a restriction. That's it. And so let me give you those examples. Number one, if you were arrested and your arrest was never referred to a DA's office for further prosecution, and the statute of limitations has passed. Let's say if it was a felony, that would be 4 years. If it were a misdemeanor, that would be 2. And so if nothing ever happened with that and the state did not move forward within the time required for your offense, you are automatically entitled to a restriction.
That's
If
powerful.
for yeah, if for so moving on to the next category, if you have been arrested for an offense and it moved on to the prosecution stage, and for whatever reason, the district attorney decided not to bring charges against you for what you were accused of, then again, that same result, you would automatically be required for a state initiated restriction.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, you were charged with an offense. This happens a lot in the family violence context.
Okay.
Let's say that it happens a lot in the family violence context, used to be in the possession of marijuana context when we were prosecuting those kinds of offenses. And sometimes in shoplifting cases, if you were accused and it was your first offense and you agreed to a program, a pretrial diversion program, for example, one that says if you complete family violence intervention training or a particular course on that specifically address shoplifting or any other pretrial diversion program. And part of the agreement of that program, which they usually are, is that your offense would be dismissed. If you satisfactorily complete it, then the state is required to initiate a record restriction if you complete that program. We see this a lot in anger management, family violence, and shoplifting context, right? So if you completed a course and then you never heard anything back, chances are that's still on your record. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, just still on your record. So you need to check. Number three, let's suppose you're charged with an offense, it goes to prosecution, and you go to trial on the case and you are acquitted and found not guilty. You are entitled to a state record restriction, meaning if the state could not meet its burden of proof at trial, it needs to go ahead and expunge everything and restrict everything that's on your criminal history report. So there's in another instance, and this is not really a record restriction, but it is important. Let's suppose you are arrested and charged with certain offenses, and then the prosecutor, once they receive the case, doesn't move forward with the same charges that the police charged you with, right? Those would be what we call hanging charge. So you would want accuracy, right? Because what you were convicted of should reflect what you were arrested for, right? And so you would want to make sure that that has been cleaned up as well, right? So those are the instances where you are automatically entitled to a record restriction, and you don't need to hire a lawyer or anything for that. What you do is you contact our office, and we have the expungement request forms actually on our website as well. And
Wow.
so you download those, you fill out the form. It actually goes to an inbox that's checked by someone here at the office, and they process you and typically follow up with a letter to let you know what the status of your request is.
Now that's pretty amazing. Now that's something that you guys have developed
Yeah.
under your tenure. I don't remember seeing anything like that.
That's one of the first things that we did when I got here, because in the past, expungement clinics and record restrictions are very hard to gauge. It's very hard to gauge what the community response and appetite is for that. We know that there are a lot of people who have questions, but the other thing that, but we don't know how many people could, if we say we're going to do a clinic in, 30 days, we don't know if 5 people or 5,000 people are going to show up, right? And so the other thing to note is that whenever you are dealing in the same way that the medical industry realizes that there is sensitivity around the processing and access to a person's medical information, there ought to be a way that someone can sort what is really administrative in a way that gives them dignity, right?
Absolutely.
And in a way that allows them to show up and or make this request without having to show up, in a in a in a in a place where there are hundreds of people and not everybody knows
You got it
that,
right.
right,
Mhm.
there's something that you're concerned about, right? So clinics are a good thing, but our thought was, how can we deliver this service to people in a way that offers them dignity and resolution?
That's powerful. That's powerful. Human dignity is something we often forget about whenever there is an exchange with someone who has a need, and typically we, have a take it or leave it appetite um, when we are serving someone. But
Right.
I can appreciate that. Everyone
Well,
deserves a little dignity because they're made in the image of God. So that's good. That's good stuff.
There's that, and there's also, I get approached. You'd be surprised how many people I get approached by who have family members who have convictions, right? And they just want the information so they can get it to their family member. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, you're right. Dignity in the process is in and of itself a part of justice in terms of treating people fairly and with respect and honor.
So let's say you qualify for a record restriction. You've under the scenarios that you've set forth, and you've already set forth one way that people can go about it. They can go to chathamcountyda.org, right? Is it
.com.
.com?
Mm-hmm.
chathamcountyda.com, and there record restriction, uh, uh, a digital kind of a digital pathway is available on your website.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, okay, so if I qualify, how can I go about obtaining help?
Mm-hmm. Um, you can, if for example you don't avail yourself of the digital means, then um, you can, a lot of people, the vast majority of people that we have who are interested in this service attend clinics. And the clinic is just a practical clinic where you come in and you say, here's what I have. And then someone on site pulls your criminal history. And then you talk to the folks and the staff, and this is something that I'm very grateful that you have been active in for years and years and years. I think before I was even a member at First Tabernacle, I remember showing up at one of these, just being a lawyer and showing up at one of these expungement clinics. And, these are hugely helpful. So the other way is to go to the prosecutor's office face to face and make an appointment and request an expungement, or hire an attorney because you think your criminal history might be an issue, and get that person to navigate the process for you. I
So
do I do want to add um, something that I omitted when we were talking about eligibility. You asked me, the question is, who is eligible for a restriction?
yes,
I gave you the circumstances under which people are automatically entitled to a record restriction,
okay,
and meaning a record restriction that we, the state, have to initiate. There is a second class of record restrictions that arise from legislation, where a person may or may not be eligible for an expungement, but a judge has to make this determination.
okay,
And so let's talk about the that middle category for a second. In 2013, the state expanded its law on under what they call the Second Chance Act. And what that means is that it allows people who were convicted of misdemeanors to have their records expunged, provided that, and this is how it's unusual from the first classification. In the first class category that I gave you, you don't have a conviction at all, right? You don't have a conviction at all. In this particular class, you do have a conviction, but this is a form of clemency, right? So in other words, you're convicted of a misdemeanor offense, and the right amount of time has passed, 2 years since the date of arrest. You don't have any new arrests, etc. You can have a one-time restriction for that offense, even though you were found guilty, which is compelling, right? Either you were found guilty or pled guilty. Assuming that the right amount of time has passed, you can have that record expunged. But that is something that requires a petition to a judge and you to make a showing that you've met the requirements of the statute. In
okay,
that case, that is a huge benefit, because the vast majority of Americans and Georgians actually have some kind of misdemeanor conviction on their record, right?
wow,
The disadvantage is that you have to either know the process yourself or hire an attorney to help you file a petition with the court to get that record restriction. Does that if that makes sense.
Sure, it does.
Hmm.
And
Now,
then there are other advocates like Georgia Legal Services,
sure,
um,
absolutely.
the I know Port City Bar,
Hmm.
attorneys who do some of this work in a pro bono
Hmm.
fashion. Um, I think, oh Lord, our friends at Deep, I think, have something to do with that process.
Right.
Uh,
Hmm. Right. Right. And
and like those great partners that'll be with us next week, Nancy DeVetter and some of her law team, grateful for them and the work
absolutely.
that they have been doing. But now you mentioned, and I don't want to cut you off. Did you have a follow up piece to that?
I did. In this second category of cases might also be the instance where, let's take terroristic threats for example. Terroristic threats up until I think it was between sometime between 20, I think it was 2014, was a felony, right? It's
Yeah.
been reduced to a misdemeanor. The
Really?
question, yes, it has certain aspects of it. And so the question is, if you if you were convicted of that, you might want to hire an attorney to see if a judge in their discretion might grant you a restriction based on the fact that you have a felony conviction that would have otherwise been a misdemeanor.
I
That
missed
issue
one.
came up. That issue came up, but that's the type of discretionary restriction that you actually need a lawyer to go before the courts and ask for, right?
Okay.
Now, let's say for everything else that doesn't qualify for for a restriction, and I want to say this, I'm moving to a third category. A third category I want to say now. If, for example, your offense does not qualify for restriction under the statute or under the automatic restrictions that I talked about initially, then what you likely need is a pardon, not a restriction.
Okay.
Pardons are issued by the Board of Pardons and Paroles, right? So, and that's a completely different entity than us. And so I get a lot of questions about, hey, I pled guilty to a drug offense 20 years ago and it's still on my record. And well, what you likely need in that instance is a pardon, which is a separate procedure.
That's important. That's
Hmm.
important. Um, I guess if you're in need of a pardon from the Department of Pardons and Parole,
Right?
uh, this will be something that you again need an advocate to help take up.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
More than likely. More than likely.
Duly noted. Duly noted. So one of the things that I think are exciting, and I really just want to publicly thank you for this, um, is that for a lot of the clinics, generally you have to bring a GCIC report with you. And I know that there are
Right.
some pieces to that that may be prohibitive, whether that be maybe it's cost prohibitive for you. If you are in a spot where you are trying to choose between obtaining this report or meeting some other basic need in your life. So that could be that could be something. Also, the the idea, right, of going to the police department or wherever with the uncertainty of what might be there. I
Yeah.
know, I'm certain that there is, that's a little, that's a bit prohibitive. Nobody wants to go to try to clean things up and find out there's an active warrant that, we forgot about or whatever. So,
Right.
so one of the things that I am incredibly grateful for, and I want to publicly thank you, at our expungement clinic next week on Monday, June the 10th. And a part of this conversation was to answer some of the questions in advance before you even get here, before whoever you want to uh, send this information to, before they even arrive on site. They have heard from the top cop in the county. They've heard from Madam DA herself as to who qualifies and what the guidelines may be, and where you may need some help and where they may be able to just go ahead and initiate it for you. So those questions have been answered. But she's gone an extra step, and she's made provision for those GCIC reports to be pulled on site next Monday, June the 10th. Uh,
Absolutely.
Monday, June the 10th, between 5 and 7 p.m. Um, there'll be representatives from her office here with the ability to pull your GCIC uh, report here on site, along with um, our friends at DeVetter Law, Nancy DeVetter and DeVetter Law, our friends at Georgia Legal Services, Deep, and several other friends who are continuing in the work of justice, and particularly in the work of providing record restrictions.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we are constantly thinking about, Pastor Osborne, is how to add value. In order to pull a criminal history, you have to be a law enforcement agency, like our office, the sheriff's department, the police department. Truly, the obstacles and the obstacles that you mentioned are very real in the life of people who are. I mean, you wouldn't be. Yeah, so that's the thing. But so we are there to actually pull the criminal history reports on site. We should have staff available to review the criminal history to see if you are on site, to see if you are actually eligible for one of those automatic restrictions. And if you are not and you need a lawyer, if you fall in that category too, then we can you pass go and you go on to Nancy, and then she tells you what you need, and she and her staff tell you what you need and who can help you and get you into that process. But the third thing is that if it is one of those things, hanging chads that fall in category one, where your record was supposed to be restricted and it was not, we can do that on site for you
That
that day.
is
So
incredible.
yeah, yeah, we can
So
do
we
that.
heard it. You heard it tonight. That's absolutely important. If your record was supposed to be restricted and it was not, that can happen on site. That
Right,
can happen on
correct,
site next Monday.
correct, right.
Absolutely important. Thank you
And,
so much.
yeah. Apart from that, it's a long process. You're mailing, you're following up with people, and all these other things. But we want to be able to offer that value in the community where it's needed, right?
Uh,
So we're glad and honored to be able to participate, to partner with you on this, and look forward to doing this on a regular basis.
we thank you. So I do have a question from our Facebook community. Um, how does this apply to first offender cases?
That is an excellent question. That's a wonderful question. First offender cases fall within category two because first offender cases involve the court. So if you were arrested and prosecuted, treated under first offender, your record is supposed to be restricted. But it's hard to it's the in most first offender cases, in many first offender cases, because the person just kind of gets off probation and kind of goes on their merry way, and nobody is thinking, hey, let me go back and restrict this record, right?
Right.
That falls under category two, and that is please, if it applies, come out and see us. We can make a determination as to whether or not you apply, and that's something that I strongly believe the better and our other partners will be able to help you file a motion for, and that's something that can be resolved rather quickly.
Well, I'm really, really, really excited about that because, again, these are the people, these are our families, these are our friends, people who've had barriers in whatever area of life because of it, excited about somebody being able to get a fresh start. And so, is there, I think there was one more question. I've misplaced that question somewhere, but let me just go ahead and say thank you for your time tonight. And is there anything else that you think we ought to take away from this conversation tonight?
No, I think that we've covered all the bases. Um, and, I just hope that we continue to create more opportunities to have these community based discussions and clinics and create these opportunities for those out there who need it.
I think with incredible leaders like you, we'll be able to do it, and we'll be able to make Savannah a better place. A better place. I want to thank you for your commitment uh, to to this process, your commitment to community, and just your desire to help out with something like this. And let me just say again, tonight was a clarifying conversation so that you know, even before anybody arrives next Monday, which of the three categories you fall in and how this applies to you. And if you are in one of these categories, we want to make sure that you're here on site next Monday, Monday, June 10th, Monday, June 10th, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. here at First Tabernacle Church, 310 Alice Street. We'll have, again, representation from the district attorney's office who can help you make sure they can help you figure out where you fall within that determination. They'll help you determine if you're eligible and which category you fall into. And there'll also be advocates here who can help you maneuver through the process should you need the courts, should you need to take some further steps. The room will be filled with advocates who can help you navigate those pathways. So we're incredibly thankful. And since I want to just thank you once again, just for the opportunity to sit down and have this dialogue.
No
Thank you
problem.
for providing the community with this. I'm seeing all up and down. Thanks for the great info, great information tonight. Thanks for the information, very informative information. So I want you to remember, I want everybody to remember, you remember those who are working for you. And so our sister is here tonight. She's reminding us that she works for us and that she is working tirelessly, not just within her capacity in the courtroom, but also to help provide a better community. And we absolutely appreciate that. So thank
If
you.
I No problem. The pleasure and the pleasure is all mine. I do want to add and encourage. You have been so gracious to open this up to the community wide, beyond the walls of Tabernacle. So thank you for even doing that. I would encourage you that if you provided a registration link, that people register if they intend to appear before the 10, that they register in advance, because what that does is helps us to expedite the process to run the GCICs for those people who have pre-registered beforehand. And that way, we want to make sure that the clinic runs smoothly and that we're able to serve as many people as possible.
You would want them to go ahead to your website and maneuver through the process.
They can, unless you've already provided a registration link for them. They're welcome to do that on our website, chathamcountyda.com.
Okay. So let's give two pathways. Pathway one, chathamcountyda.com. Go ahead and figure out where you fall in the process. You can also email hello@devetterlaw.com. Hello@devetterlaw.com. And our advocates, our team members, our partners rather at Devetter Law with Deep and Georgia Legal Services will begin to help you prepare and move through the process. But make no mistake about it. We want to help as many people as we can, which is why we wanted to start today to go ahead and clarify who's in the field.
Right.
And then from here, We just want you to get registered again, as our fearless leader said, so that potentially all the paperwork can be done, and we can be ready uh, to help you as soon as you arrive on site. So there is hello at Devetter Law. There is ChathamCountyDA.com. But make sure you use one of the resources so that we can go ahead and get you in the queue and prepared for next Monday, Monday, June the 10th, Monday, June the 10th, between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. We're
Yes,
excited.
I am too, very much.
I thank
Thank
you so much. This
Thank you so much for having me. And
great.
my office is available to you and to the community in any way that we can be. So
You consistently show it, and we thank you.
thank you very much.
Peace, grace. So, friends, you've had the opportunity to hear from our fearless leader tonight. Um, District Attorney Shalana Cook Jones. She's just been incredible, giving us some amazing information tonight. And it's conversations like these that constitute what we call Justice June. So tonight was about how to get a criminal history expunged. You've heard it from our DA. We want you to use one of these pathways, whether that be ChathamCountyDA.com or hello at devetterlaw.com, and go ahead and get in the queue so that you can be helped on next Monday, Monday, June the 10th, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., an arrest eraser expungement clinic. And I need you to do me a favor. We all know someone who is justice impacted. I need you to help me push this. This is a community initiative. And so I need your help to get this to the right people. I want to make sure that your child gets the job that they want, or that they're not barred from an apartment or renting a house, or that there's not some employment restriction or some restriction in benefit. I want to make sure that whatever that person is in need of, if they have been negatively impacted because of their criminal history and they qualify under one of the circumstances highlighted tonight, I want to make sure that they get with the right people. So would you help us push this? I need your help. I need you to make sure that you share this with as many people as you can. And when our event goes live on Facebook, when the event comes up for next Monday, I need you to share it as many times as possible so that we can get this in front of the right people. Now, in addition to this, an additional Justice June thrust is voter uh, voting status, knowing your voter status. Voter education and voter mobilization is a justice initiative. It's a justice initiative. And so on Juneteenth, that's Wednesday, June 19th, there's going to be a virtual dialogue in this same space, a virtual dialogue on voter suppression on Wednesday, June 19th at 7 p.m., featuring our very own state senator, Derek J. Mallow, and Dr. Francis Johnson. I want you to make sure that you tell everybody about that dialogue. If voting is not important, why do people keep trying to take it away from you? And not only that, I want to encourage you to know your status. If you don't, visit mvp.sos.ga.gov, mvp.sos.ga.gov, mvp.sos.ga.gov. I want you to visit that page so that you know your voter status. All right, friends, it's been good being with you. And you're welcome to join us anytime, but especially during Justice June. If you haven't done it already, make sure you like, comment, and hit share so that this is a blessing to somebody else in your sphere of influence. Thank God for you. May the Lord be with you. Have an incredible, incredible night. Peace and grace.